first name, PuppetART, with ART capitals. It's kind of hidden clue. PuppetART, ART capitals for American Russian theater. So
and that was your original name?
Yes, original name, and we decided to keep it. My name is Igor Gosman. I'm one of 3 founders of PuppetART. We came from Russia 30 years ago, and about 25 years ago, we set up our first resident theater in downtown Detroit, where we were almost 20 years. And again, originally, thought was very modest place where we can store our stuff, because puppetry is all material things, and maybe, hopefully, a little corner for rehearsals. I had no idea about all that dynamics between downtown Detroit and suburb. I had no idea about that.
I was 19 when I first started working here in this very spot, and I mean, it was thrilling for me. I spent the entirety of my 20s here, and a good portion of my 30s.
There was this little, it was 3 shops on the first floor, the gallery we had, and first 2 shops were available. One was very dirty, used to be very dirty bar, and the other was there was a art collection or collaboration, some art organization, which just moved out.
Since they founded the troupe in '95, I think that they probably were looking for a permanent location, I think, because theaters of this type that they had started with this location were or are common overseas, like where they had come from in the former Soviet Union. There were theaters, and I've been to a couple of theaters in Ukraine that were very similarly structured, and they were permanent, regular for the general public, puppet theaters open to the general public. So I think that they were using that kind of model from where they had come from, where their training is from, and where they had lived for their formative years, or however you might call it. So I think it was a natural progression to want to be stable somewhere and put their efforts into making a permanent location for the community, which they succeeded in doing. I mean, even in the most kind of stark or maybe bleak, as it might be thought of, times, like in the 90s and 2000s before the so-called Renaissance, they always had a consistent audience.
They invited the guild for one of our meetings, come down to this area and took us in this building. There was no electricity in the building. They gave us toy hard hats and flashlights. Now it's evening.
Reflecting on it now, it seems a little unusual because, I mean, a lot of people, frankly, they sort of, except for maybe a sporting event, they would kind of avoid Detroit in some ways. It wasn't like it is right now with all kinds of activity and, new architecture, new businesses. It was quite quiet and sparse. And we used to have to close these really foreboding kind of metal like window shutters at night and lock them and everything. It was it wasn't as welcoming as it is now. But
it must have been a fancy shop at some time, because it had this beautiful staircase that went up to the 2nd floor.
So these 2 places, like a front store in a little plaza.
There was a boutique I would always hear about, and some of the belongings that they left in the basement, which was quite, I don't know, I guess it was kind of spooky, but it was like a labyrinth down there. It was enormous and sprawling and weird little corridors. It was very, enchanting, I guess, in its own way, in its own kind of weird way. But
so we went up the stairs with our flashlights and our hard hats, and across the 2nd floor to see the space, down a little staircase that led down to where their theater was going to be. And we stopped there, and all they had were folding chairs.
for a time, the theater was actually only about half of that left side.
And let's see, it was Irina and Natasha did this finger puppet. They had long ballerina legs and tutus, and they did the dance of the little swans from Swan Lake. And it was really quite funny because one of them kept goofing off, you know.
Okay.
So there were four of them, two each had a hand. It was beautiful.
And in 2003, I think it was, not long after I had started there, they were able to expand into the neighboring portion, which was really huge. And that way, it opened up a lot of different improvements, like for when we had field trips come down. It was like the kind of the giant foyer that they came in. There was a gift shop that was quite extensive, and we had an office. But before, everything was kind of squeezed, which still, even when we were about to leave, I kind of pleaded with the powers that be that maybe we could just reduce it back to the smaller version and not have that giant foyer, not have the big gift shop, and just kind of go back to the original, the OG puppet theater.
I don't think I've ever been to a puppet theater except for Detroit PuppetART, and I believe I saw a few puppet shows there before I started puppeteering there, and when I saw the first show, I think it was Turtle Island, I think it's called, with the turtle, and the way it was just amazing. I was blown away with just like it was just magic. It was magic.
So we went down there every time they opened a new show, and there were, I can't even remember how many. I started trying to remember all the names and found that I'd have to do a lot more research. Igor would have workshops after the performance if the guild came down, people who wanted to build, whatever simple kind of puppet they were doing at the time.
Igor would often do an intro before we open the curtains, then we do the show, and then kids have an opportunity to make a puppet out after the show. And I think the museum aspect to it, which I hadn't really seen, I think when they moved to Southfield, it's more of a museum in that space than it was downtown. And they have a pretty extensive collection, I think, from what I saw, from what I see. And it looks like they've, started to develop that over time, maybe even since they moved from downtown. And that's a whole element in itself.
Every puppet theater in Russia where I was working, I heard all the theaters would have a museum. Small, maybe a couple of displays, or big museum with a lot of puppets. But the reason is you cannot put in the boxes and store away or just throw away puppets. It's not just the environment where you perform as the human, where you share what you have. It is a partner which also has the same amount of soul, scale of soul as you are. So therefore, they cannot be just put. They must have a comfortable place.
So I can see that some of the puppets here are made by Irina because I
Oh,
read the
yeah,
book,
there's-
but a lot of these puppets, like where
All
would most
puppets
of
in-
these come
mhm.
from?
All puppets in display behind the glass are collection.
Okay.
Our collection, it's not puppets on top, out, are all made by Irina.
Okay. So do you know who made those puppets?
Why not? Irina Baranovskaya designed them. As to whether she had maybe a little help, that's maybe Igor helped, which is the case. You may have some, but it's all her designs and her execution ultimately. But sometimes there may be another set of hands, but she is the designer. I'm not sure. It could be like batting, or that's the thing that's kind of worrisome. You can't really get in there without kind of, making a, without changing it or without having to put it back or,
An autopsy.
Yeah, right.
When you wrote the catalog, how much inner prying did
Oh.
you do?
Yeah, some of them since the catalog was based on a set of puppets that were acquired, and then a set of puppets that were made here by Irina Baranovskaya, the designer. Hers were a lot simpler in the way that I didn't have to do any of that kind of undoing or looking or whatever, because I don't want to destroy anything, but I have to see what's inside. So she helped me a lot with being the designer. That was a great benefit. It was just really kind of a matter of organizing all the materials, because they have so many, all of them. But other ones are not quite as simple. Like what is now Myanmar, the Burma has a long held puppet tradition. And now obviously, I mean some I had to guess, like some marionettes over there, like for Czech and German. I had to kind of guess from certain things without completely destroying it. But there were very accurate, educated guesses, like Irina would help me. But in the case of this, the pants had to be undone, and there is a wooden carved penis.
Other organs too, or that was all
Yeah.
you discovered?
No, that's with this one, that's all. But there was a sign we had from a previous museum kind of associate, but they had the wrong sign. It was the wrong character, so I was able to. I mean, it was verified not only by examining, but the professor that I emailed about it, because I was kind of confused, told me you should check, because that'd be a good way to know this character or that character.
But generally, all the puppets that are not in glass cases were made.
Our puppet not. Only puppet, in cases only our acquisition, so to say.
And how does that happen? How do you?
Over the time, some puppets we bought when we were traveling on the flea market. Some were given to us as a donation. People consciously or subconsciously understand that you cannot just throw away puppet. And we had a lot of puppets brought to take care of them, because I cannot. I don't,
They have.
because I cannot throw it away. Either it was because of my parents when they taught me, when they performed for me. It's always some emotional attachment.
A lot of them, people have puppets from somewhere, like their mother loved puppets or whatever. and they having a puppet theater, they'll come. It's like a magnet. They'll find you, and of course we appreciate it, and it's very generous, you know. But it's over the years, it's inspired many people to bring out their personal collections, or like in the case of Applesauce, the original designer's son, who continued on the performing with his father's shows. Greg, that's his son, he brought us one of the applesauces. There were more than one, I don't remember how many, but we are fortunate to have that one.
Up until World War II, there was no such thing as the Detroit Puppeteers Guild. There were puppeteers in this area, but a man named Ed Johnson came back from World War II. He had been in service, and started to gather people together to make a Puppeteers Guild. And there was he called a meeting in his living room, and there was this crusty old Punch and Judy man who, you know, he didn't say much, but he listened a lot. And he said, when this meeting was over, and people were really very interested in forming a guild, and everybody had left except this Punch and Judy man, and Ed said to him, well, what do you think? And he said, I don't know, so many women. I'll always remember that. I wasn't there, but it was quoted to me. Those so many women kept the guild going, actually.
So what year would that have been?
46.
You made a real commitment to diversity of culture.
That's basics. That's how we. The more I learned about Detroit, more obvious, clear became for me what kind of theater we should have. Every theater has its own personality, a certain scope of ideas and philosophy, and wherever you are, if there is a theater, you building up the theater, you must define yourself, I mean, as a theater, accordingly to the place, be relevant and all other things. And that's where, at that time, it became known to me that how diverse communities are in Metro Detroit and in Detroit East Side, West Side, downtown, North. I mean, so many different places, so many different communities, and with everything what is absolutely common, there are so many unique aspects exist in every community. So, and because again we grew up, we were formed in Russian Puppet Theater, that material, the story of people, folklore, is one of the, it's like a place where you go to find inspiration for the story, for your work. It is so natural to go to folklore or big, great literature to get inspired for your productions.
I knew it! It's a bird! Look! Your wife is a bird! I told you! She's a bird! Bird.
You have seen me as I truly am. You have broken your promise. And now that you know this truth, I cannot stay with you any longer.
Do not leave me. I love you. You will always be my wife.
It is too late. The sky calls me. The wind whispers my name.